Lucas had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one our parents bragged about at every family gathering. He was charming, confident, knew exactly how to manipulate people into seeing him as the perfect son, the perfect man. I, on the other hand, was just there. The younger brother. The one who didn't quite measure up. I learned early on that there was no point in trying to compete. Lucas could burn the house down, and my parents would scold me for not stopping him. So when Melanie, his girlfriend, got pregnant, no one questioned him when he insisted on a paternity test. Just to be sure, he had said, flashing that easy, disarming smile. And of course, the test confirmed he was the father. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. It started with something small. I needed to use Lucas's laptop one afternoon. Mine had crashed, and he wasn't home, so I figured he wouldn't mind. He borrowed my stuff all the time without asking, so why not return the favor? I wasn't snooping. I wasn't looking for anything. But then I saw it. 2 nearly identical PDF files sitting in his downloads folder. Same name, different timestamps. I almost ignored them. Almost. But something about them nagged at me. I clicked the first one, the older one. Paternity test results, Lucas Carter, not the father. The air left my lungs. I stared at the screen, my mind scrambling for an explanation. I clicked the second file, the one with the later timestamp. Paternity test results, Lucas Carter, 99.9% probability of paternity. The fake test. My hand shook as I stared at the screen. I felt like I had stepped into some kind of alternate reality. Lucas had faked the results. He wasn't the father. So who the hell was? I had to talk to Melanie. The entire drive to her apartment, my thoughts raced. Did she know? Was she in on this? Or was she just as much a victim as the guy Lucas had framed? When she opened the door, she looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled up messily like she hadn't had the energy to do much with it. She gave me a small, confused smile. Hey, what's up? I didn't waste time. We need to talk. It's about the paternity test. She frowned. What about it? I hesitated, my stomach twisting. Lucas faked it. She blinked. What? I found the real results. He's not the father, Mel. The color drained from her face. That's not possible. I have proof, I said quietly. I pulled out my phone, showing her the screenshots I had taken. This is the first test. The real one. And this, I scrolled to the second image. This is the one he used. Melanie's hands trembled as she took my phone. She stared at the screen, not blinking, like if she looked long enough, the words would change. No, she whispered. Mel, I don't think Lucas ever planned on telling you the truth. She let out a shaky breath, pressing a hand to her stomach. But that doesn't make sense, she murmured. I was only with him. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. Are you sure? I asked carefully. Her eyes snapped up to mine, wide, desperate. Of course I'm sure. I watched her closely. The panic was real. The confusion. The fear creeping in at the edges. She really believed Lucas was the father. But he wasn't. And that meant something was very, very wrong. Melanie sat down hard on the couch, like her legs had given out. She still had my phone in her hands, gripping it so tightly her knuckles had turned white. This has to be a mistake, she murmured. I sat across from her, leaning forward, trying to catch her eyes. It's not. I triple-checked the files. Lucas faked the test, Melanie. He knew. She finally looked up, her face pale. But she let out a shaky breath. That's impossible. You were only with him? I asked gently. Yes. Her voice cracked. Of course, I was. She shook her head violently, like she was trying to shake the whole conversation out of existence. I don't understand. She set my phone down carefully on the coffee table, like it might explode if she moved too fast. Then she buried her face in her hands. For the first time, I hesitated. What if I had been wrong to come here? What if this broke her? But she deserved to know. I forced myself to keep talking. Melanie, if Lucas isn't the father, then... She let out a small, choked sound, half a sob, half a breath. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to, because she got it. In the moment the realization hit her, I saw something shatter behind her eyes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The apartment was silent except for her uneven breathing. Then, finally, she whispered, if I was only with him, and he's not the father, then that means... I swallowed hard. Something happened that you don't remember. Melanie squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head. No. Mel, no. Her voice rose, frantic now. I would know. I would. But she stopped. because something inside her wavered. Her breath came faster. Her hands curled into fists against her lap. She looked like she was trying to pull back a memory that refused to come. I waited. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, she whispered, "There were nights I felt off." I stilled. "What do you mean?" She let out a shaky laugh, but there was no humor in it. "I thought I was just stressed. You know? Pregnancy hormones. Sleep deprivation. But sometimes, I'd wake up feeling wrong." The room felt colder. My skin prickled. "Like what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She swallowed hard. "Like my head was heavy. Foggy. Like I'd had too much to drink, except I hadn't." Her fingers dug into her thighs. "I'd tell Lucas, and he'd just laugh it off. Said I was imagining things. That I was being paranoid." My stomach twisted into a painful knot. "Melanie," I said carefully. "When did this start?" She looked up at me, eyes hollow. "Right after I found out I was pregnant." A slow, creeping dread wrapped itself around my ribs, squeezing. "Did Lucas ever give you anything? Drinks? Medicine?" Her breath hitched. For a moment, she just stared at me. And then, "Oh my God," she whispered. She bolted from the couch, sprinting into her bedroom. I jumped up to follow. She yanked open a drawer, digging through it frantically. Bottles clattered to the floor. Papers spilled out. And then, suddenly, she froze. She reached in slowly, pulling out a small, nearly empty bottle. My stomach dropped. "What is that?" I asked. She turned it over in her shaking hands, reading the label. And then her face crumpled. "This isn't mine," she choked out. She sucked in a breath. "Lucas gave me this. He said it was a prenatal supplement." I stepped closer, heart pounding. "Mel, what's in it?" Her fingers shook as she read the ingredients. And then, she dropped the bottle like it burned her. I picked it up. The label was full of scientific jargon I didn't understand, but one word stood out. Sedative. A fucking sedative. Melanie let out a broken sound, her hands flying to her mouth. "No, no, no." I felt like the room was spinning. Lucas had drugged her. And if he had done that? I squeezed my eyes shut, rage bubbling under my skin. "Melanie," I forced out, "we need to do another test. A real one. We need to know who the father is." She looked up at me, her eyes full of terror. And then, slowly, she nodded. The clinic waiting room was too bright. Too clean. The air smelled like antiseptic and cheap air freshener, and the hum of fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above us. Melanie sat beside me, her hands clenched together so tightly her knuckles were white. She hadn't spoken much since we left her apartment. I didn't blame her. She looked like a ghost. Her fingers twitched when the nurse finally called her name. "You ready?" I asked softly. She didn't answer. Just nodded once and stood up, moving like she was on autopilot. I wanted to say something reassuring. "It'll be okay. We'll figure this out." But I didn't, because I didn't know if that was true. I watched her disappear down the hallway, leaving me alone with nothing but my thoughts and the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. I couldn't sit still. I got up, pacing near the windows, trying to force my brain to slow down. But it wouldn't. The sedatives. The memory gaps. The fact that Lucas had gone so far as to fake an entire paternity test. It meant he was covering for someone. And I had a sickening feeling I already knew who. My father. I wanted to believe it wasn't possible. That Lucas had done something awful, sure, but that it didn't go that deep. But then I thought about the way Lucas had always been our dad's favorite. The way he had been groomed to be the perfect son, the golden child. The way I had always been the disappointment, the one left out of their whispered conversations, their inside jokes. And I thought about what my father had always said about loyalty. Family protects family. I had never thought much about it before. But now, those words felt like a noose tightening around my throat. The door opened. Melanie stepped out, pale and shaky, the nurse guiding her toward the front desk. I rushed over. "You okay?" She nodded, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "They said results will be ready in 3 days." 3 days. 72 hours of waiting, knowing that every second that passed brought us closer to an answer we might not be ready for. She hugged herself, rubbing her arms like she was cold. "I don't know what's worse," she whispered. "Finding out the truth, or still not knowing." I swallowed hard. "We'll get through it." She let out a short, bitter laugh. "Yeah? And what if the truth is worse than we imagined?" I didn't have an answer for that. We left the clinic in silence. The next 3 days were hell. I didn't sleep. Could barely eat. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach twisted into knots. Melanie didn't talk much either. She stayed in her apartment, barely responding to my texts. I wanted to give her space, but I also didn't want her to be alone, not with what she was going through. On the third day, I finally drove over. I knocked once. No answer. "Mel, it's me," I called out. Still nothing. I tried the handle. Unlocked. A bad feeling crawled up my spine as I stepped inside. The apartment was dimly lit, curtains drawn. Melanie sat on the couch, staring at a piece of paper in her hands. I didn't need to ask what it was. My breath caught. The results. She didn't move. "Melanie." Finally, she looked up. In the moment I saw her face, my heart dropped. Tears streaked down her cheeks. Her lips trembled. Her whole body shook. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. She just held out the paper with a trembling hand. I took it. My fingers felt numb as I unfolded it. My eyes scanned the words once, twice, and then everything inside me went cold. Biological father, Daniel Carter. My father. I nearly dropped the paper. My pulse pounded in my ears, my vision tunneling. No, 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 no. I looked at Melanie, my throat closing up. She was staring at me like she was waiting for me to say something, to fix this. But I couldn't, because nothing could fix this. I opened my mouth, but my voice was gone. My whole body felt like it had locked up. Melanie let out a broken sob. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. I don't understand how this happened. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to breathe, trying to think. Lucas had known. That's why he faked the test. Not to protect some random guy. To protect him. I clenched my jaw so hard it ached. My hands curled into fists. I wanted to punch something. Scream. Do something. Instead, I just whispered, "We have to go to the police." Melanie flinched. "No." I stared at her. "Melanie." "I can't," she choked out. She looked terrified. More than terrified. She looked trapped. "Why not?" I asked, softer now. She let out a shaky breath. "Because he's your father," she whispered. "And Lucas." She cut herself off, shaking her head. My stomach twisted. "What about Lucas?" She hesitated. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. "He's been watching me." The air in the room turned thick, suffocating. My hands went ice cold. "What?" Melanie nodded, her breath coming fast, shallow. I thought I was imagining it at first, but it's been happening for weeks. At the grocery store. Outside my apartment. At work. I felt sick. Lucas wasn't just covering for our father. He was making sure she stayed quiet. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the floor. My blood roared in my ears. "We have to get you somewhere safe." Melanie just looked at me, like she wanted to believe me but didn't know how. I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Pack a bag," I said. "We're leaving." "Now." She hesitated for only a second. Then she nodded. Melanie moved like a ghost, grabbing clothes, shoving them into a small duffel bag without looking at what she was packing. Her hands were shaking. I stood by the window, pulling the curtain back just enough to scan the street outside. Every car, every shadow, felt like a threat. Lucas had been watching her. How long? Since the pregnancy? Since he faked the test? Since he realized I was getting too close to the truth? A movement near the corner made my stomach clench. A dark SUV parked across the street. It hadn't been there when I arrived. "Shit. Mel, we need to move," I said, turning back to her. "Now." She zipped the bag up with trembling fingers. "Where do we go?" "Somewhere they won't think to look." I grabbed my keys, scanning the room one last time. It felt too easy. Too smooth. Like we were getting away too clean. Something was off. I stepped into the hallway first, checking both ends. Quiet. Too quiet. Melanie clutched the strap of her bag like a lifeline as we hurried down the stairs and out the side exit. The air was thick with the smell of rain, the sky heavy with dark clouds. I kept a hand on her back, guiding her toward my car. The SUV was still parked across the street. No movement inside. No headlights. But my gut told me we weren't alone. The second we got inside the car, I locked the doors. Melanie sat stiffly, her eyes darting between the mirrors. "Are they following us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know." I pulled out onto the street, keeping my speed steady, normal. If they were watching, I didn't want to tip them off. Melanie exhaled shakily. "This feels like a nightmare." I didn't answer, because it was. We drove in silence for a while, winding through side streets, doubling back a few times to see if anyone was tailing us. No one was. But the paranoia didn't fade. Finally, I pulled into a cheap motel off the highway, The kind of place where no one asked questions. I paid in cash. Gave them a fake name. Once we got inside the room, Melanie sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing her arms. "What do we do now?" she asked. I leaned against the dresser, running a hand over my face. "We go to the police." She flinched. "Mel, we have evidence. The real test results. The pills Lucas gave you. Your memory gaps. And who's going to believe me?" She cut in, her voice hollow. I stared at her. "My father is a respected businessman," I said quietly. "Lucas is the perfect son. This family," I swallowed hard. "They know how to cover their tracks." She let out a slow, shaky breath. "I'm scared," she admitted. I sat beside her. Me too. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain had started outside, soft at first, then harder. The sound filled the room, a steady hum of white noise. Then Melanie whispered, "What if Lucas isn't just watching me?" My chest tightened. "What do you mean?" She bit her lip, eyes flickering toward the window. "What if he's waiting for something?" A shiver ran down my spine. I had a feeling we were about to find out. The rain hadn't stopped. It pounded against the motel window, filling the silence between us. Melanie sat with her knees pulled to her chest, staring at the door like she expected it to burst open any second. I checked my phone. No messages. No calls. Just silence. Too much silence. Something was coming. I could feel it. "Maybe we should leave," Melanie whispered. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. "And go where?" She didn't answer. I stood up, moving to the window, peeking out through the curtain. The parking lot was mostly empty. Just a couple of beat-up cars, a flickering neon sign. No black SUV. No Lucas. For the first time in days, I let myself think, really think, about what came next. We had two choices. Go to the police and risk my father's influence crushing this before it even started. Or handle it ourselves. Neither option felt safe. Melanie let out a slow breath. "You think Lucas is working alone?" The question sent a chill down my spine. I turned to her. "What are you saying?" She hugged herself. "What if he's not just covering for your dad? What if your dad told him to keep an eye on me?" The words made my stomach turn. Lucas wasn't just watching her. He was reporting back to him. I felt my pulse quicken. Then we're already out of time. A loud thump echoed from outside. We both froze. Melanie's eyes snapped to mine, wide with fear. I grabbed my keys off the nightstand, moving fast. I flicked off the lights, signaling for her to stay quiet. Another sound. This time, closer. Footsteps. I gestured for Melanie to move toward the bathroom. She hesitated, then slipped inside, closing the door just enough to hide herself. I took slow steps toward the door, heart hammering. Then, a knock. Soft. Measured. I didn't move. Then a voice. "Open the door, man. Let's talk." "Lucas." My hands clenched into fists. "Not happening," I said. Silence. Then, "Come on," he sighed. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." My breath was shallow. "You mean don't make it harder for him?" Lucas let out a short laugh. "You think this is about Dad?" I froze. "You really don't get it, do you?" Lucas continued. "You always thought I was protecting him, that I was the little golden boy covering up Daddy's sins." I swallowed, gripping the doorknob. "Aren't you?" Silence. Then, softer, almost amused. "I'm the one who did it." The air in my lungs vanished. Melanie. The pregnancy. The drugging. The entire nightmare. It had been Lucas. Not my father. My hands shook. "You're lying." He exhaled slowly. "Wish I was." I could hear the smile in his voice. "Dad never touched her," Lucas said. "He doesn't even know." I switched the test because I couldn't let him find out. He'd kill me. I felt like I was going to be sick. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. A pause. Then, because she was never supposed to keep it. The blood in my veins turned to ice. "You think I wanted a kid?" Lucas continued, voice calm, casual. "You think I wanted to be stuck with her?" I gritted my teeth. "So you drugged her. You," my voice broke. "You took away her choice." Lucas exhaled, like he was getting bored. It wasn't supposed to go this far. She was supposed to, he stopped himself. Then, but she didn't. I felt like I was drowning. "And now here we are," he sighed. "You gonna let me in?" I tightened my grip on the doorknob. Then I let go. "No," I said. Silence. Then a soft chuckle. "Wrong answer." A loud bang shook the door. I stumbled back. "Melanie, run." She threw open the bathroom door, eyes wild. "What?" The second bang splintered the wood. I grabbed her hand and ran. Through the back door. Into the rain. barefoot on wet pavement. Lucas was right behind us. "Stop," he roared. Melanie sobbed, nearly tripping. I yanked her forward. My car. Just a few feet away. I threw the driver's door open, shoving Melanie inside. Lucas lunged. I twisted, slamming the door into him. He grunted, staggering back. I jumped in, locking the doors, fumbling with the keys. My fingers were slick with sweat. Lucas slammed his fist against the window. "You're making a mistake." The engine roared to life. Tires screeched. We flew out of the parking lot, rain blurring everything. Melanie sobbed beside me, shaking violently. I know," I said, gripping the wheel. "I know." Headlights flashed behind us. Lucas's car. I pushed the gas pedal to the floor. "Call 911. I shouted. Melanie's hand shook as she grabbed my phone. Her voice was a mess of sobs and panic. "Please, we're being chased. He has a gun." "Gun." I checked the mirror. Lucas rolled down his window. Something glinted. "Down," I shouted. The first shot shattered the back windshield. Melanie screamed. I yanked the wheel, swerving onto a side road, trying to lose him. Headlights. Too close. Then, bang. A sharp jolt. The car spun. Tires skidded. Metal shrieked. We hit something hard. Pain exploded in my skull. Silence. Then voices. Shouting. Red and blue lights. My vision blurred. Rain poured through the broken windshield. Melanie was sobbing. Someone was pulling her out of the car. Hands were on me, rough voices telling me to stay still. And then, Lucas, face down on the pavement, a gun inches from his outstretched hand, blood pooling beneath him, motionless. A voice. A cop. He's gone. Melanie collapsed against me, her whole body trembling. And just like that, it was over. Really over.